So we've made it. We've made it to the final room of the first floor of the house. Feels pretty good. It's kind of fitting that this is the living room that we would wrap up with. It's almost as if I had designed it that way. I don't know. The living room, it's arguably the most important room in the house for me. I don't know. It's the gathering place. It's where the TV is. It's where I unwind. So when I'm not working my full-time desk job or YouTube videos or designing and installing in people's houses and spending time with friends and family, I try to unwind now and then, and that happens here. Let's kick this off. Let's get into the living room. Last regular episode of the season. When I first looked at pictures of this house, when the house popped up in my MLS portal, the kitchen was something where I was like, ooh, that's super dated. I bet you could do neat stuff. And then the parlor was, again, well, this is kind of dated, but we could do some stuff. But it was seeing the living room in the distance that I wanted to get to. And then it was the details of the living room that really pulled me into the estate. Looking at the listing photos of this house, it was an immediate charm. There was a warmth that just flowed out of these images of the stairwell with all the original wood on it and the giant window and just this huge open space that was just begging for life to be brought back into it and someone to drag it, willingly or not, into a modern world. I think everyone can agree, especially people that grew up in the Midwest or had elder relatives in the Midwest. This is a snapshot in time of our childhoods. It's not shag carpet, but it was super thick carpet. This wood tone, and even coming into the house the first time, the smell of it just pulled all these memories in of like, you've been here before, and I wanted to make it mine. The day that I took ownership of the house, I came in and I took my vertical pictures with the camera, and when I walked from room to room, I know I had my writing playlist on Spotify that's just instrumental music, it's movie scores. So I had that on, it was very calm, and I quietly walked through the house and took my pictures. And in the living room, it was back in this corner right here where I pulled the carpet back to see what the floors looked like and that they were wood. And, I didn't really want to like sit on the ground because I didn't know when the last time the carpet had been cleaned, and nothing looked clean necessarily. It probably was clean, it was just old. As I went through it, there was a lot of tooth sucking of, what am I going to do? What am I going to do in here? This was one of the few rooms in the house that didn't have wallpaper in it, but the walls had a lot of damage on them. The wall behind you, as if you were standing here right now, the wall behind you and this wall here are the original plaster walls for the house. They have been repaired, I don't know how many countless times. You could see the hairline cracks in them and the nail holes. And when you have a nail hole in a plaster wall, it's not a normal nail hole. It looks like an explosion went off because of the stone that bursts out of it. When I had finished taking pictures, I went through the house with a smudge stick of sage and peppermint, and I smudged the house and kind of introduced myself and did all that. Came down here, and the morning light was coming through beautifully from the window up in the stairwell and coming down between the slats on the railing. And I thought, well, this is the time to take a picture, because as with my other houses, I didn't get the chance at the ranch to take a photo before anything had been moved in, whereas I did at the manor. One house felt better to me than the other, and I partly blamed it on that, even though there are a lot of other forces at play. But here I had the chance to take that picture, so I plopped down, sat against the railing, and I took this photo. It just felt like this was correct. Being in the living room, despite not feeling like this is the heart of the home, that's the parlor and the green bathroom that you guys saw, it's still the most important room. For whatever reason, it just is. It feels good in here. From a design perspective, I did not know what I wanted to do. The Muro board for this, upon reflection, does not reflect me having any idea what I was doing. I knew it was going to be a green color, and I knew I wanted it to incorporate nature. That was it. I have these two photos because I knew that at some point in time, I would want the television in sort of a built-in scenario. I didn't know how to do that because there's one solid wall in the living room. The rest are broken up by windows. This was really truly a blank slate catch-all room, despite how important it was. I settled on a green color that I liked called Meadow Trail by Sherwin-Williams. It worked well with the egret white that I was using in the rest of the downstairs for the trim, and it worked well obviously with tricorn black, which is the accent color. But that was it. That was it. I have nothing else to say on that. So demolition started. Now, there wasn't much to demolish in the living room. The bulk of it was going to be removing the carpet. Like I said, the carpet was insanely thick. There were also interesting things in the floor where the floor had some saggy moments. You know, it felt like there was a little bit of give to the wood. And then up at the front door, it felt higher for some reason at the front door. And I've shared this before, you know, my parents were the wonder twins at removing all that carpeting, but getting the carpeting out of the living room was step one of the whole process because it was the main throwaway. To go upstairs, you had to come through the living room. So let's tear that out first. So it was this great kind of chocolatey brown green thick carpet. Got that all ripped up, and you can see right away there were two colors of wood flooring, and right in the dead center of that, raw wood, which indicated something had been there. So I want you to keep that in mind. Something had been on the floor there. At the other end, when we pulled the carpet up by the front door, there were two sheets of OSB and or plywood stacked and cut in like primarily a rectangular piece, but had a little angle on the corner. That was because the threshold to the door, there's a 2-inch rise there. And instead of having that wood be a sharp drop off, they used plaster and created a ramp to it. So in this photo, looking at all that debris, that was just from pulling out that piece. But you can see at the bottom of the image also, there was like a weird black floor, and that was very damaged. It was it wasn't squishy, like it wasn't rotten, but it had maybe dry rot to it. But it had also been cut at points. Like someone had fucked around and found out with that. So I don't know if there had been something there at one point, but these unfinished pieces of the room lined up. There must have been a wall there at some point. Remember that as well. They continued tearing everything out as it was coming out, and you could really see the two colors of flooring. It became very evident that there used to be a foyer for the house in addition to this front sitting room. Once that was done, I've mentioned before, the house really did not have security to it. It didn't have deadbolts on the doors. This is the front door. It is original to the house. I don't think it had ever been restained. So I did the sacrilegious thing of drilling into it because I needed to have a deadbolt on the front door. I needed to secure the property because I don't trust people that much, and living in a new neighborhood, especially in a property where I wasn't going to be living in the house for 2.5 months after purchasing it. The only other real demolition that happened in here was the entryway that goes into the parlor. We were going to be raising that up because it was too low. With construction going on throughout the rest of the house, the kitchen, I had already determined how high the entry was going to be for that. So we were matching heights, which meant busting into this wall. And I did panic initially because this wall here is sheetrock. The wall over the doorway was sheetrock, but it was on top of lathing. That made it a lot harder to take out. Obviously it did come out and it was fine. And once the demo was done in here, nothing else really happened for a while. And when I had days that my workload was light for my work job, that's for my desk job. We had a big giant folding table in here, and I would bring my laptop, connect to my cell phone for a hotspot, and work. And this video is from when the roofers were here putting the new roof on. And when you have an empty house with no carpeting anymore, this is what getting a new roof sounds like. In circumstances where you have a room like this that did not require much demolition, conversely, that means there's not much construction either. Apart from framing that doorway, there was really nothing to be done in this room other than floors. With the squishy areas of the floor where they have rotted a bit, we were going to be splicing in new maple flooring to clean that up because I was going to restore the floors, and you got to have matching wood. So my dad and I went to a local business here in the Fox Valley and purchased X amount of maple flooring. And this was waiting for the poor guy working at the business to come to the back door and get us the wood so we could leave. There was a whole story with that day, and he was working alone, but he was a new guy and people didn't show up, and we felt bad for him because there were a lot of us in there, but also like we needed our product so we could go home. So this is my dad. This is after cutting out the blackened portion of the floor and whatever was wrong with it. Dad actually cut down a little bit deeper into it so that we could put a new portion of subfloor underneath it, because even the subflooring was bad. And then this is laying in the new maple floor, trying to get it to line up, and he'd pulled some pieces out that ran a little bit farther into floor so it could be spliced a bit better. And this is how it looked. You know, right here, obviously it looks insane because it's new flooring on 130-year-old flooring, but you'll see once it was all sanded down, you'll see. Another bit of construction, so you can see the opening in the background. We had not raised it up yet. The part where you can see through the wall, that was how high it was going to be, but we were going to have to build a support system to put in place because that is a load-bearing portion of the wall. So we needed to make sure that it wasn't gonna F up whatever was going on upstairs. You can see plaster in this, and there had been a real skinny nook in the wall that I hated because it was just it's a dated thing, and I was already messing with the nook in the parlor and adding trim to it. This was not one I could do the same thing to because it was too skinny. It was maybe 1.5 feet wide. So I put some new 2x4s in it, added sheetrock, and just covered it up because out of sight, out of mind. When it was time to raise the doorway up, my dad brought scaffolding here, we put that together, and then it was a group effort with my parents. My brother-in-law was here, my sister, who was laying at the top of the stairs here. Those are her legs because she was pulling staples out as well. In this, the ceiling is supported from the other side. So my dad is cutting through 2x4 verticals there so that we can get everything removed and put the new shit up. I don't know, I'm running out of words on what to say about this. I just had to stand up there and make sure of something. There was some reason I was up there, and I don't remember what, but whatever it was, it gave me time to take a selfie, so there's that. And then this is with the doorway actually done, and I had put new sheetrock up, so it was closed back in. The minor amount of construction being wrapped, that meant it was time to move on to painting. So it's time to start doing the pretty stuff. The painting in here, because the walls had like that kind of sand texture that you'll find, especially homes that were painted in the 80s, they would do a lot of that sand texture on the walls. I was covering that up, so I went through with my hopper and sprayed plaster all over the walls, which is why the door and window are covered in this image. So I added my texture to everything. This was how the knockdown looked. It came into handy with things like covering up that nook that was built into the wall, because I've said before, I'm bad with plastering, and this hid all sorts of sins of mine. When it was plastered, I think it was a couple weeks before I actually did any kind of a painting, but I got a tinted primer for this room. It's a drywall primer, just so that when I did the nice paint, the plaster I had sprayed on the walls would not absorb it too quickly. So this is getting everything painted with that tinted primer, getting ready for the meadow trail color that I would be putting on. And in addition to painting the walls, I was going to be painting the ceiling. So the ceiling in here was pure white, and I thought, well, it needs to get repainted. I might as well repaint it egret white, which is the trim color for the house. So I started, and I wasn't panicked about it because I was fine with all the colors, but you can see here what pure white next to egret looks like, and it made egret white look gray, which is still something as I started painting, I was like, I don't know how this is gonna look. This is an instance of with it up and not against anything pure white, you would not look at this and guess it was any color other than white, because there's nothing to base it off of. So if you're ever doubting yourself on not painting your white ceiling an off-white, it looks just fine and you won't know. When the ceiling was dried, I was able to start cutting in with the final wall color, that meadow trail. And in my mind, it was gonna be more of a brownish khaki color. I thought it was gonna be a lot more brown than it was, but it was more of an army green. I love the color. I still do love it, and not long from now it's gonna go away because of what's coming to the living room. I have loved it, and it's not going away for a lack of no appreciation toward it. So I cut in the ceiling, cut in the corners, only so far down, as you can see in this photo. And the reason behind that was I decided at the last minute it would be smarter to sand the floors before painting the walls a nice color and getting them all dusty. So that's what I did. I've talked a lot about this floor sanding process, and in here you can get a better sense of what the process looked like before I could begin. And this is what happened in the other rooms too. I went around and swept everything, and then I went around with a shop vac and sucked up everything from between the floorboards that I could, because, you know, there were bits of metal and nails and rocks that had come through, and the less you have to get in way of the sandpaper, the better. Sucked all that up to clean the floors, and then got busy with the floor sander. Now, the bulk of the room was fine because it had been refinished at some point in time long ago. So we're talking in the 50s or 60s, it was probably refinished in a lighter color. That all came off pretty well. I had not started in the parlor yet, so I didn't know about the shellac, but you can see here, I was running into issues, and it was where the foyer had originally been. If you missed the parlor episode, it's essentially a wax that hardens. And it might not be, so don't, you know, I'm not an expert, I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like a wax, and as you're sanding it and it's getting hotter, it melts into tar and streaks across your floor. It stinks and it starts smoking, and it's a whole thing. And I managed that day to limp through getting all of it off. But by the time I moved into the parlor, I was running out of my sandpaper rolls for the big belt sander, and that was it. I did persist on this part of the flooring and got through it. Here though, a couple things. I needed to rent a smaller sander to get closer to the baseboards. The big belt sander is just too bulky to get up there. But I mentioned the other week when I talked about the study and the quarter round that I was applying to the baseboards, and that the house originally had them. You can see in this photo along the baseboard that there had been quarter round there when it was originally put in. I was going to add it regardless, but I felt better knowing, yes, it had been there at one point in time. I don't even think this was when I was done, but dumping the bag for the belt sander pretty quickly. I mean, I think filled up really fast. You can see a line where the foyer met the living room. I was going to be putting a rug down regardless, so I knew I wouldn't see it in the end. But no matter how hard I tried, either that first time around or when I rented the belt sander again, I could not get rid of that shadow line. And I don't know why this floor was just a different color in here. What treatment had been done to this to make it that way? Maybe when they refinished it, it was a certain type of oil that absorbed into the wood. I don't know. Between belt sanding experiences, I finished painting the walls because it did not get as dusty as I had anticipated it would. So I thought, oh, it's fine. And when you do round two, it'll be fine. Painted the rest of the walls. It's very army green looking in here. I don't know what I want to say. It felt good because this living room is very large. The living room is about 18 feet from this outer wall to the front door. So it is a pretty big room, and it's probably, I don't know, 12, 13 feet going the other way. So I got the belt sander rented a second time, and in here and in the study, it was just going over everything with the medium grit sandpaper and then the fine grit. Because I was spending so much time in the house and so much time during different times of day, I got to start experiencing things like the way the sunlight would come through the lead glass window at the bottom of the stairs. You start appreciating all these little pretty moments in your house that you're discovering them for the first time and how special they are. I really like that. This is with the first coat of polyurethane on the floors dry. I used a water-based polyurethane by Varathane, and I chose water-based because an oil-based polyurethane is going to yellow over time as it reacts with the air over the years and sunlight that might be reaching it. And I didn't want things to turn golden. And with water-based, it stays clear. You do have to refinish it sooner than you would with oil, but that's fine with me. To apply it, and I don't have a video of this, I wish I did, but to apply it, you mix up your gallon of it, and then you just drizzle it across the floor in a zigzag. And I had a big pole with a giant squeegee on the end, and you just drag it around. It was very satisfying to do this. I should have, between layers, or at least after a couple layers, I probably should have lightly sanded it because there were some bubbles that had popped up. Ultimately, I'm happy with how my floors look, and they're beautiful in their imperfections, and that's fine. But this is with the floors finished. Ignore the drapes and how short they were. I used to have this insane amount of white grommet drapes from IKEA. So for the time being, it was just, I needed a window covering, and that's what it was. But those are the drapery rods from Pottery Barn. I'm not too much of a brand snob when it comes to things, but the hardware for windows, they do a really great job at Pottery Barn. Oh, hi. Okay. You gonna be in this with me now? Yeah, I know you are. You gonna make the biscuits? Okay, I hear you. Look how close to me you can sit. I know, you're a good boy. Getting everything painted and the drapes up was really the last push before I could move into the house. And the living room happened about a week before I actually moved in. I had just had carpal tunnel surgery on my right hand. That happened 2 days before moving in. So it was a little difficult to kind of get stuff going and arranged. This room very quickly just became the comfort spot of the house because I didn't have my office set up either downstairs or up. I would bring my laptop in here and just work from here all day long. And the cats would come and hang out with me. What was really great about it was that after being displaced for a couple months, you know, they lived exclusively in my old bedroom at my parents' house for the 2.5 months between living at the ranch and living here. I think they were just so happy to be free to move around and explore and hang around me because I was gone a lot for 2.5 months. And now it was time to kind of reconnect. It had been 11 years since they'd had a space this big to wander freely, and they loved it, and their personalities changed and they became much more calm because it is a quiet house. It's a quiet street. It wasn't like that in Minnesota. They changed, and it was really nice because they're older, and old people, old pets don't like change. So they adapted great to it. That winter, it was time to start working on the trim. I did not paint any of the trim in here until that winter. This is the last room where anybody can have a hissy fit about me painting original trim. Apart from these two walls, because they are original walls, that wall where the TV is, none of the trim on the bottom is original. It was all added in probably the 60s when this wall was added, because this wall is not original. I've mentioned this in a previous video, but we can talk about it now in the living room. When central air was added to the house, this is where they added it for the second floor, primarily for the second floor. Instead of trying to incorporate it in the original wall of the house, they built a whole facade for this wall I'm going to say it's about 7 inches from where the original wall had been. In addition to those raw spots on the floor, keep that in mind too. Anyway, I hadn't painted any of the trim in here because it was just, I had so many other things to work on, and this was like, you'll get to it when you get to it. This is the room for relaxing, not constantly working on projects. First, it started with getting the trim on the doorway into the parlor, and that was done that summer because I wanted that ready before my parents' anniversary party that I was hosting. Added the wood to it, had to figure out the angle of the stairs, the wood that's underneath the stairs there. Turned out great. Before it got too cold, I also wanted to refinish the front door. So that was great, and it was also bad. The great was that you can see here, this door is 130 years old, older than sin. The stain on it came off phenomenally. I used the power sander on the decorative trim along the glass. It didn't do anything because it couldn't get into the nooks, and I just thought, okay, you can paint this. You can paint this part of the trim because you're never going to get that out. And it had a good amount of damage, and the glass was loose in the door. So for me, the only way I knew to fix that was, all right, you're going to put black caulk in there to kind of reseal it, and then you can paint that stuff black. The bad was, I should have known this. I feel like this was just common sense that I should have known. And it is that glass scratches. A power sander on glass is gonna scratch it. When I tried to sand that decorative trim, I should have put down masking tape or painter's tape or any kind of protection against the glass, and I didn't. And the sanding disc scratched the glass all the way around the door frame. It's beveled glass. It's original. I was pretty devastated. I mean, I'm not gonna cry, but I was pretty devastated about it because it was just such a like, you dumb bitch. Why couldn't you have just taken a second to do this? You knew you should have, but you thought, it's fine. It's fine. What's the worst that could happen? Well, the worst that could happen is that you irreparably harm the glass. Anyway, I put the door back up. I stained it in Kona and then polyurethaned it. And then in addition to staining it, I needed to refinish the hardware for the door. Now, it still has its original handle and faceplate with the mechanism in the door. I refinished it. It's fine. The door does not latch, though. You have to deadbolt it to keep it shut. I have tried everything I can to fix that. The handle and mechanism inside are they're very chintzy. I'm not gonna throw them away. I will reuse them elsewhere in the house, but this summer I will be replacing the whole door handle set with a modern, not modern looking, but modern functioning handle, because I just need something that when I shut the door, it's gonna stay shut. With the front door stained and polyurethaned and finished, because I was going to be painting the trim in here, the gaps in the trim were pretty horrendous, and the air, as it got colder outside, I mean, I've got the Christmas wreath on the door in this, I could feel it coming in through these cracks. So everything got caulked, and that meant caulking along the wood itself and down the sides and across the top of the crown and everywhere. As I was doing this project, well, if you're making a mess, you might as well fix the mess as you had made. So like the drapery rods, I've mentioned nothing is straight in this house, myself included. Nothing is level. Everything is crooked. Nothing's at a right angle. Mounting the drapery hardware with a level and making it straight made it look crooked, which is such a frustrating thing when you have to like do stuff and then eyeball it to decide like, yeah, that looks straight. I know it's not, but it looks straight. And if it looks like it, then that's what you have to go with. So I do all that, yada, 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 snap your fingers, and you've got egret white on everything. The transformation that it brought to this room was phenomenal. It cleaned up the woodwork, which had a lot of stains and things on it. And again, don't get on me about not restaining it, because I just don't even bother. The walls were suddenly much more green than they already had been. Everything looked new and clean, and I painted the black on the original windows to cover up that wood, and everything was finally getting put together. And it's one of those things where you start to wonder if this is a room where I spend so much of my time, especially relaxing time, not necessarily functional time, you know, like the study, that's my workspace. I work in there. The kitchen, you're usually doing things, or I'm working on projects in there. The living room is for relaxing, decompressing, and spending some free time not having to think about all the things you have to do or should be doing. Why would you wait till the end to work on it? Keep that in mind too. Oh, shit. As I was painting everything, I was also replacing all the outlets. So you could see, you know, my handful of fun here where some outlets are grounded, some are not. I wanted everything the same with my rectangular Leviton or Lutron outlets that I use. I got my new drapes, which are these camel colored velvet drapes. Loved them instantly. Even more so, those brought a bit of a golden hue to the green. And I found that that was really the message that I wanted in this room, was this kind of brownish green, warm, inviting feeling. And the drapes were helping me with that, with the end result being just gorgeous. And I was so happy with it and pleased with the fact that this room, compared to all the others, had no solid plan, and it just came together naturally. I did buy a vinyl for the front door so that I wouldn't have to see my F up with the scuffs, and you can see behind me it has the diamond lattice on it now for a vinyl, and I love it. It works just fine. It looks good. I wish it didn't have to be there, but the other reason behind putting a vinyl on the glass was because really until recently, the TV was here in this corner and my armchair was there, and sitting in the armchair, if you came up onto the front porch and looked in, you had a completely unobstructed view of me sitting there, and it just creeped me out and I didn't like it. So that's why I had to cover that up, because I needed some sort of privacy in there. The reason I wanted you guys to remember what I was saying about the raw floors, the facade of the wall, and something else, which I've forgotten, and this is what happens when you don't write scripts anymore, is because next week is the season finale of season 3. This episode wraps up the first floor of the house. I will not be posting anything in the month of April as far as regular episodes go. There will be stuff on my Instagram, but not on YouTube. And that is because through the month of April, phase 2 of the estate kicks off. And instead of leaving this room for the end, this room that is my comfort zone that I hang out with my little babies, this room is starting it. And where the original wall had been that separated it, that is going to be an entire wall of transoms. Where the facade wall is here, that will be built-ins. I've got these other walls to tear out and re-insulate and re-sheetrock. I have a ceiling to tear out. I have a lot of stuff to do in April, and there's just not going to be time to spend editing videos. They will come back, and they will come back strong. But that is that. We'll get to before and afters in just a second. By the time this is posted, I will probably have already filmed the season finale, so it is too late to ask questions that you want answered for that video, but please feel free to ask questions. Specifically, if you had questions or comments on anything you saw in the video today, you can leave them in the comments below. You can also reach out to me on my Instagram account at restoring_Sean. Or if you are curious about working with me, whether you live here in Wisconsin or remotely, because I can do that as well, you can find out more information at restoringsean.com. I've got all the things there for you. So that being said, thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the kind comments that you guys leave. It's wonderful. It keeps me going on this. So let's do before and afters. Let's wrap up the first floor of the estate. And until next week, take care, and I will see you soon.